Welcome back to NFL Spotlight. I am your host, Ari Meirov. We are continuing our team-by-team previews for the 2025 NFL season, and we are on to the Carolina Panthers. And joining me today, he covers the team for the Charlotte Observer. It is Mike Kaye. Mike, what is going on? It is great to see you. The narratives have changed a lot when it comes to the Carolina Panthers over the last year and a half. This is year 2 for Dave Canales and Dan Morgan, and this is a team that finished 5-12 last year, but context is kind of required here because there were some signs of improvement and hope, especially with the way Bryce Young played at the end of the season. They won 2 of their last 3 games. I'll start off a general question here. What are the overall vibes right now? How much of that late season momentum has carried over to camp right now?
Well, I think they're promising vibes. Somebody said early in camp, one of the defensive players said something to the effect of, it went from feeling like a team to feeling like a program. And I think, especially in this NIL era and these young professional players are kind of getting situated in the NFL at the top level, it's easier for them to relate when they get used to kind of a college-esque program. And not that I'm saying the Panthers are a college-esque program, but I think Dave Canales' mission is to focus not only on the what, but the why. And that's something that we're seeing a lot in pros these days. They want to know the answers to all the questions. And I think that that's kind of gotten a lot of bought in. He's also the same guy every day. That's what they claim. And we mostly see it in press conferences as well.
Well, I want to ask you about the people in charge of here. That is Dave Canales and Dan Morgan. Before I get to all the players, just how much of a difference has it made with them running the organization? Because as you all know, covering the team, this was a team that people looked at as a laughingstock for a little bit before they got there and were in charge. How much of a difference has it been with them in charge, and has the entire organization just shifted culturally because of them?
Well, I think it starts with Dan Morgan and then Brandt Tillis, his EVP of football operations. I think the two of them have been in lockstep. There is no assistant GM. That's basically Tillis. And I think they are on the same page from the standpoint of what they want to do with salary cap, how they want to build long term. They don't want to just have one of those years where they spark up and they make a wild card and then lose, and then they're not contending for a while. They want to contend long term. And they inherited a pretty messy salary cap situation, especially for the way that they wanted to play it. I think the previous regime gets knocked a lot without like nuance. But with that said, I think the nuance of what Morgan and Tillis want to do and want to accomplish makes a lot of sense. They're in lockstep with Canales. And I think they're in lockstep with ownership. I got to tell you, there's a sense of this is Dan and Brandt's show. Like, they are running things from a front office standpoint. Dave's running things from a head coaching standpoint. I know a big national conversation was how involved Tepper was, but at least in the last year and a half, it feels like these guys are being hired to do a job, and they're doing that job.
I wanted to ask you about the David Tepper situation because, like you said, there was so much talk about meddling and he's involved, and it's, Nicole maybe, like, all of that was going on. Have they just taken a step back? Did something change? Did he realize something? Like, have you heard anything about just their the way they were owning the team, coming in as new owners, and they realized, like, maybe we should change things up over here?
Well, I covered Shad Khan during the early part of his tenure in Jacksonville. He had been there for a few years, just like David been there. Tepper had been there for a few years before I got there. And I think every owner kind of learns on like the same path. Like even Jeffrey Lurie, like when he first got in the league, he learned on the same path. The difference between Jeffrey Lurie and those two guys is Jeffrey Lurie has never hired a coach that hasn't won 10 games. He's been a successful hirer. And I think, they saw a moderate improvement last year. They hired, I think you have to go back to Matt Rule. So I covered 10 days of Matt Rule. Then he was fired. And then, because I came midway through the 2022 season, then they hired Frank Reich with the idea they wanted the complete opposite guy. They wanted an NFL program builder with experience. That was an utter disaster. They set the record for losses in a 17-game season. So I think, bringing in Canales, there's a long runway. I think they've learned to be patient and learn to trust the people that they hire. Dan Morgan is a former Pro Bowl linebacker who's been around the organization for years. He's learned under guys like John Schneider in Seattle and Brandon Beane in Buffalo. It's a pretty good resume. Brant Tillis joined the Chiefs when they were irrelevant and got to be with them all the way up until 3 Super Bowl rings. I mean, like, Canales, again, around Pete Carroll, one of the best head coaches of the last 20 years. So, like, I think there's trust in that, and I think they've worked well together to the point where why does ownership need to be involved? You know what I mean?
Definitely feels like they have stability when it comes to the organization, from the front office to the coaching staff and the guys that are in charge right now. And that's where it brings me to the players on this team. And we'll start with the quarterback, obviously. Bryce Young last year was quite the roller coaster. 2 games in, getting benched. A lot of people thought this is it, first time in Carolina. Then he gets the job back. And the way he finished the year, the last 3 games of the season, 10 touchdowns, no interceptions, over 600 passing yards. What changed last year with him? Was it a confidence thing? Was it a wake-up call? Because he went from looking completely defeated to looking like a franchise potential quarterback.
I think a lot of it came with pre-snap. I think he was pressing before the snap. I think getting out of the huddle was a struggle those first 2 games. And listen, everybody wants to talk about his struggles. The nuance of it is when you have a young quarterback who doesn't have a ton of weapons, who, was pulverized his rookie year, who's going to have, he's going to see some shadows, and then he's got to put up 30 to 35 points a game to be competitive. That's going to be really difficult for anybody. But really, I think what happened was, they started him week 1 of his rookie year. I wrote about it several times. They shouldn't do it. They literally signed the definition of a a good bridge quarterback in Andy Dalton, and just let Bryce cook. But they did it within a structure that's not what he did at Alabama. And so that faltered. Then they get into the next year hoping that this is just going to work. I think watching Andy Dalton play for 4 weeks, where he put up pretty good numbers despite, a lack of success in the win column, helped him understand that he could trust his offensive line, trust his receivers, trust the process, trust what the offense looks like, and understand where it comes from the outside looking in. And I think that helped. He came back against Denver, had kind of a mediocre game, but then, the next week played New Orleans and lit up the sky, took that momentum into Germany, and then from there they were off to the races. With a franchise quarterback who struggled in his first year, you're just looking for promise. And then once you see that promise, you want to find proof. Well, in order to prove that he is a guy beyond this year, he's got to take the promise that he had last year and make that kind of work consistently throughout this year.
From your reporting, has there been anything that Dave Canales did or Brad Idzik did, sitting him down? Because I feel like, I don't know if people watched the Week 18 game versus the Falcons last year, but that was a crazy game, back and forth, and Bryce and Michael Penix were outdo. It was unbelievable to watch it, but like, it feels like his confidence in the game, confidence at the podium, the way he speaks, like everything has changed. Is there any specific moment that happened where it felt like, all right, I could do this?
I think Denver kind of showed you the rhythm a little bit. It wasn't a great game by any means, but I think leading the huddle, he felt like he was more swift with how he was handling, the huddle and getting to the line and getting everybody lined up and then snapping the ball. I think he just felt an utter comfort after seeing it, from a sky-high view. And so I will say, I think Canales and Bryce have had to communicate. I also think once you've reached rock bottom, there's nowhere to go but up. Bryce was raised very well. He comes from a very sharp family. They are very smart people. And I think the mindset is with their faith, but also with their, he's an optimist, I think, in a lot of ways. And I think that kind of helped. Well, okay, cool. I've been at rock bottom. There's no way to go but up. And what are you going to do? Sit here on rock bottom? Or are you going to take this challenge? And Dalton gets slightly injured in a car crash. He gets his opportunity. Maybe that was a sign that this was supposed to happen. You never know. I think realistically, you get some confidence once you kind of start putting up. I think that Saints game was like huge for him. I mean, it was a division opponent. They got like railroaded in week 1. Like it was, I mean, it was a disaster for them in week 1. And I think bouncing back and having the game that he had to kind of get redemption was very helpful for not only him, but the program.
Now, I do want to ask you one more thing about Bryce. When the benching happened after week 2, I know Dan Morgan already has said, like, we just need him to reset. He'll be back here. Do you really believe the organization believed that he would come back and be this, or do you think they felt like we're not sure about this?
I think it was mixed. I think there were some folks that were like, okay, what can Bryce do that he didn't do the previous, what was it, like 16, 17 games? And then I think there were other people who were like this kid won a Heisman. He, I mean, could make some incredible plays when you let him cook. I think one of the problems is he tried to learn within a structure, and that's not his game. He is a guy who can scramble and make really impressive plays with the ball. Like, he is not a guy who's just going to be a pocket passer, but he's also not a guy who's going to be like Jalen Hurts or Lamar Jackson and run for 100 yards a game. That's not his game. He's kind of a guy who is just really good in improvisation and making throws, off platform, which he has done a ton of in training camp.
Let me ask you about the guys around him going into this season. I mean, I think it could be sneaky fun if everything falls into place correctly, but Chuba Hubbard in the backfield, you have all these receivers, first round picks, Tetairoa McMillan, Xavier Legette, Adam Thielen, Jalen Coker. Like, there are guys on this team who could definitely ball out. What have you seen from the weaponry that Bryce Young will have going into this season?
Well, Tetairoa McMillan had kind of a slow first week, but since like July 30th, or since the calendar turned to August 1st, he has really started to surge. He's making rookie mistakes, but I think that's kind of to be expected. He was never known as like the ultimate route runner either. I think he and Bryce have found some rhythm. But obviously if you saw the preseason game, you saw some of their timing was off. But there was that 30-yard catch down the sideline that we've been seeing a lot of that in training camp. Jalen Coker's taking the next step because he's really worked on his body. Coming in as a rookie from a small school last year, it was just like hit the ground running, see if you can do the best you can. You know what I mean? I think Xavier Legette looks healthier. He had foot surgery. He looks fast. He's catching the ball over the middle really well. I think he's better fit to be that Z receiver, that flanker, as opposed to being the X position. If you go back to last year when Deontay Johnson was still with the team and he was playing the X position, Legette actually thrived even when the quarterback position was like kind of out of whack from that Z position. So I think they want to use him as a guy who can move around, kind of a Deebo Samuel type, and kind of make the most of that. Here's what I'll tell you. Jatavian Sanders is having a phenomenal training camp. He's lost roughly 15 pounds from his rookie season. He looks incredible. He is out there like looking like Jordan Matthews at like coming out of Vanderbilt, like sort of stuff. Like, he looks like a big slot receiver, which is what I think a lot of us projected him to be coming out of Texas. But I still think he can block. He impressed last year, even though he didn't really block in college. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they utilize him. Adam Thielen, Hunter Renfrow has been like a really pleasant surprise. A lot of people around the team, especially me, I thought he might have been this year's Rashad Penny, where he shows up for a few weeks and then retires. Hunter Renfrow is really tough to cover. He looks really good. And then running back wise, Chuba is the straw that stirs the drink of this offense. Rico Dowdle's going to, get in some drives and play on third down. And they really like Trevor Etienne. Jimmy Horn Jr. is like impossible to cover without pads on. When there's pads, he's still pretty tough to cover. But yeah, they feel really good about their weapons. It feels like they've made a concerted effort over the last 2 years to accumulate weapons for Bryce, and now they're starting to click.
We all know weapons is one thing. Carolina definitely has a bunch of guys, as you just listed, but nothing really works without the 5 guys in front of Bryce Young. I want to ask you about the offensive line. It's been a big priority for Dan Morgan. Last offseason signing Robert Hunt, Damian Lewis. They have a first-round pick from a few years ago in Ike Ekwonu. Austin Corbett appears to be the starting center, and of course the veteran Taylor Moden. Is that locked in as the starting 5 right now? And overall, how have they looked so far?
Yeah, Austin Corbett was named the starting center yesterday, so Tuesday. And so, I mean, it kind of looked like that heading into Brown's joint practice. It was just kind of a matter of them telling the guys. Damian Lewis is dealing with a shoulder injury, so he's week to week. And so maybe week one's kind of in doubt. But if that's the case, the guy who lost Austin Corbett for the center battle, Cade Mays, has got plenty of starting experience, is right there. What I think's impressive about this offensive line is not just the starters, but they're like too deep at every position. They've got Brady Christensen, a former tenured starter, as their like sixth man. He can play literally every spot on the line. Josh Nijman, who started a lot of games for the Packers a few years ago. Like I said, Cade Mays. Chandler Zavala is a fourth-round pick from 2023. Outside of Bryce Young's probably the most productive of that group. But he's dealing with a knee injury, and so we'll see where he goes from there. But I think they feel really good about this offensive line, and I know Bryce does.
Overall for this offense? Like, could you see a potential top 10 offense with this team in year two of Dave Canales calling the plays? Is that a realistic expectation, or there's still more work to do here?
I mean, I think in theory, yeah, that could make sense, but it's all about Bryce. Like, I really do, like, I think with McMillan, there are going to be some moments where you're like, are you sure he's the eighth overall pick? I think there's going to be moments where, Leggett slogs a little as well. But like, I think if Chuba stays healthy and Dowdle kind of fits into like his role, I think they're going to be able to ride the running game. I think that's going to then set up the passing game for McMillan and Leggett. And if McMillan can be a deep threat as a jump ball guy, that's going to open up stuff underneath for Thielen and Renfro and Leggett and Sanders. So all the cogs have to kind of work for this to be that potent of an offense. And so I think that it's possible, but I'm a little skeptical.
Over to the defensive side of the year, and earlier this offseason, before all the madness started, Dan Morgan said, what we did to the offensive line last offseason, we're going to do to the defensive line this offseason. And before I get to the signings, I think the biggest addition coming back is Derrick Brown returning from injury. How has he looked returning from that meniscus injury, which he suffered pretty early on in the 2024 season?
Well, he just returned to team drills on Monday, and Ari, I got to tell you, there was no way to run on this team, like in practice. It was really impressive when you consider last year he was out in week one, and they allowed more rushing yards than any team since 1980. So I know I got gray in my beard, but that's before I was born. So, uh, I think Derrick Brown, like Chuba Hubbard, is a straw that stirs the drink. I think they've really improved this front seven from the standpoint of bringing in Bobby Brown, who's a prototypical nose tackle who can also pass rush. They brought in Deshaun Wharton, a guy who comes from a Super Bowl winner and can rush the passer in a rotation, but also they feel like he can stop the run. Ashawn Robinson's back. I mean, like, they feel good about this defensive front, and they should.
Now, the edge is an interesting spot over here because there's been a lot of talk about we need edge rushers. Obviously, they made two trade ups in the draft to get guys in April, but the edge rushers right now, what is the current state of it? Do they have a clear number one guy, or will it be more of a rotation?
They are going to kind of use a four-man rotation. So it'll be DJ Wanham, Patrick Jones, who they just added, who they really feel good about. They feel like they can move him around. Nick Scordon could end up being their biggest defensive pick since J.C. Horn. And then Princely Uman-Milan's kind of like Josh Sweat, only like 6 years younger. He's got like insane bend and speed around the line. Like, they feel really good about this four-man mix. It's a matter of, can they set the edge and can they finish? Because I think you're going to see a lot of pressure coming from those four guys.
Now, when it comes to the defense overall, is there a competition somewhere in training camp that you're keeping a very close eye on? It seems like the linebacker situation is a bit up in the air, but overall, if the defense, like, where is the competition right now leading up to the season?
Well, it's kind of weird because I mean, their safety group is kind of wide open. They bring in Trevon Merrick. from the Raiders. He's supposed to be the guy that kind of does everything on that back end. I could see him playing dime linebacker. I could see him playing nickel corner. I could see him like moving all around. That other safety spot seems wide open between 4th-round pick Lathan Ransom, second-year safety Damani Richardson, and then journeyman Nick Scott, who knows the defense very well from his background with Ejiro Evero. Linebacker's tough. Linebacker's going to be tough. Trevin Wallace has shown an excellent ability to blitz. He's got to be a little bit more consistent. Evero said the other day that he wanted him to play faster. Christian Rosebroom, who they brought in from the Rams, who just had a career year, he's gonna line up the defense. He's got the green dot. He got off to kind of a rough start in the preseason against the Browns. I think they're going to keep an eye on the trade market at linebacker personally, because safety too. I mean, like if they wanted Marcus Williams or Justin Simmons, they'd be here. I think from a financial standpoint. But I don't think they're in a rush to do that. I also think they know where they're at from a contending standpoint. I think, when you're kind of like looking for incremental growth and long-term growth, signing a 1-year Band-Aid so that you kind of negate the growth of guys like Ransom and Richardson and Trevin Wallace, I think that's a bit of a turnoff for them. But we'll see how that all plays out. Now, if they're not getting very good production, heading into that Steelers preseason game, anything can happen, but I think they would prefer to let their young guys work.
The team that brought in Justin Blackman for a visit, he's now in New Orleans. Marcus Williams is still a free agent. I know Justin Simmons is out there, and he has a relationship with the defensive coordinator, Ejiro Evero, but to this point, nothing has been added there, but we will be keeping an eye on that. Last thing here, before I ask the final question, I ask everybody here, but what would success look like in year 2 under Dave Canales? Like, what is a realistic step forward for this team in 2025? Is that flirting with a wild card? Is it just still building and showing that we're going in the right direction? Like, in your perspective, what is that?
I think, when you look at the 3-win plus from the Reich era going into last year, I think a positive year would be another 3 wins. I think the thing with the Panthers too and the fan base, this team has not been in contention after like the first month and a half of the season since Dave Tepper's been here. And so I think if they can be competitive throughout the season, I think that's a massive win for this franchise. I mean, 2026, they're in a really good cap situation. I feel like that's when this front office can really like separate itself from previous mistakes, to the extent where, like, look, this is all on them. Good or bad, this is all on them. And so I think, they've leaned heavily into analytics. They've leaned heavily into a young coaching staff that is very good at communicating with younger players. If they can kind of spark something, it wouldn't shock me to see them win 10 games. I have them really right now at 8 and 9. But I think, I think they can go anywhere from 6 to 10 wins. Like it really... That in that division, I think it's possible. I don't think they could do that in the AFC West. I don't think they could do that in the NFC East. I don't think they could do it in the NFC North or the NFC, the NFC. I lost my train of thought. Or the AFC North. I don't think they could do it in a division where there are 2 top dogs. Really, it's right now. It's like beat the Bucs. Like that's what it comes down to, is win the games in your division, win a few on the road, and go from there. But their schedule's pretty tough.
Week 1, it's Panthers and Jaguars there coming up. So we'll see what happens there. But I'm with you. I mean, this is an organization that, at least from the people that are in the building and the way they've been doing stuff over the last couple of years since Dan got there and Dave got there, it feels like there's actual structure for the first time in a while. And that's good news. And it's all going to come down to Bryce here in year 3 and how he does. The last question for you, Mike, and I really appreciate all the time of year. Every guest who comes on the show, we ask them this: your boots on the ground, you know the team better than everybody. This is the NFL Spotlight Show. Every Tuesday, we have somebody from the NFL who deserves more recognition. Who is somebody from the Panthers organization, player, coach, executive, somebody in between, who you think might be worthy of being on the show at some point?
I think it's a great question. I think J.C. Horn is a guy who everybody knows, but I feel like he's treated like he's like the Sum 41 of rock bands, of corners. Like, it's like, yeah, we like that guy. We like that band. They've got some good hits. If you play it on the radio, we'll get it. to me, J.C. Horn is a guy who really set the tone for that turnaround last year. If you go back to the Broncos game that I brought up with Bryce Young, him jawing at Sean Payton, I got messages, like people in the building were like stoked about that. It was a huge step up of leadership. He was a guy that, like, you know, he was always around older guys and they kept leaving. So it's like Brian Burns is leaving and Dante Jackson's leaving and Shaq Thompson's leaving. And I think he is really, like, they paid him this year. He's worked really hard. He's first-time father. He's going through all this stuff. I know he was just in that minor car accident. But he's a guy they're really counting on, and he got kind of over the hump last year and made a Pro Bowl. Like he was, I want to say he missed like 22 of his first 51 games, or he only appeared in 22 of his first 51 games. So like the potential was always there. He just needed to stay healthy. And I just think he is their best player. Like when everything is said and done, he is their best player on their team when compared to his position. I think the conversation is he's a top 10 cornerback. I think he's going to jump into that top 5 this year.
Speaking on words, like you said, they paid him this offseason. Other credit to the front office. They got that done early, and as soon as that happened, we saw big deals with Derek Stingley and big deals with Sauce Gardner. So it's already looking really good, and he is a player who battled some injuries, battled some stuff, has come out on top, and really looks like an important player for that team. So we will get to work on it. But Mike, I want to thank you for coming on, previewing the 2025 Carolina Panthers. Everyone could find your work at the Charlotte Observer, and of course on Twitter they could find you, Mike Kaye. So thanks so much for coming on.
Thanks for having me.